Good afternoon and good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for hanging out with us today at the first session of the iYouLead Zoom Hangout series. We at iYouLead understand that this is a difficult time for most of us, being away and not being able to see our family and friends, and hence we thought of creating an online space where everyone can feel connected whilst enjoying meeting people from around the world and learning new things. So I am Julio Cesar Alejandre, the chairman of the International Young Food and Nutrition Leaders and a PhD candidate at Glasgow Caledonian University, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So let me just share my screen. Right. So our session for today will focus on new tools and paradigms for nutrition and improvement. And we are joined today by two iYouLead members, Karen from University of New South Wales in Australia and Preeti from University of Delhi in India. So before we start, I would like to share some reminders for our listeners. So the session will run for about an hour. Speakers have 7 to 8 minutes to share their presentation. Listeners can ask during presentation using the Zoom chat function. So you can find the Zoom chat function by clicking the chat bubble from your screens. Please find the chat bubble from your screen. So if you have questions, just use that option. After each session, 2 to 3 minutes will be allotted to answer questions. So I, as the moderator, will pick up a couple of questions sent by the listeners in the chat box. So listeners are advised to please mute their microphones to reduce background noise. And a couple of minutes may be also allotted for the listeners to clarify some points or discuss related concerns. I would also like to inform everyone that this session will be recorded and we will be sharing some instructions at the end of the session on how you can access this file online. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. So Karen K. Mehos is a fourth-year PhD candidate at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. She also serves as a lecturer in Kenvale College, Sydney, and a casual academic for several nutrition courses in University of New South Wales School of Public Health and Community Medicine and School of Chemical Engineering Food and Health Cluster. So Karen graduated cum laude from University of the Philippines in Diliman with a Bachelor of Science in Community Nutrition. She eventually earned her master's degree in nutritional science and food management at Ewa Women's University in Seoul, South Korea. As a graduate researcher, she completed a component of clinical nutrition training on vitamin research, particularly on one-carbon metabolism. Throughout her research experience, she has co-authored a book and several papers, including the first study to demonstrate the independent effects of paternal and maternal folate deficiency on fetal development. Karen started her professional career as an academician in Philippine Women's University School of Nutrition and as a national data analyst for IPC Food Insecurity Analysis under Food Agriculture Organization and National Nutrition Council in the Philippines. She was a recipient of the Korean Government Scholarship Program and University International Postgraduate Award from UNSW. Karen's presentation for this Hangout session will help us solve the diet problem of Filipino children using modeling and linear programming. So Karen, just tell me whenever you need to shift the slides.
Okay, I'll give you a few tools. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is coping well and safe. I just want to know if everyone hear me okay.
Yes, Karen, quite. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
So
of
nowadays,
course.
during the lockdown, it's really good, such a good time to learn new hobbies and different things, including learning new tools and softwares, right? So today I'll be talking about a novel approach. It's called linear programming. And today I'll be describing how dietary data, together with this tool based on linear programming, can be used to inform decisions regarding the use of food-based approaches to improve complementary feeding and all the other uses when you nutrition plan for an intervention and other uses in the space of in the space of public health nutrition. So for my first slide, it's how I use my dietary survey data to together with linear programming analysis. We know that dietary survey data is important for describing food patterns, intakes of energy, estimating risk of inadequacy of nutrients. But most food-based dietary guidelines assume that people eating according to guidelines are receiving all the recommended nutrients, which is not necessarily the case. It's not always true. So linear programming could be helpful to support development of dietary guidelines that fulfill or best fulfill most of the nutritional requirements. So linear programming analysis, it's a mathematical optimization. It's basically a simulation, minimizing or maximizing constraints. In this case, we use, different constraints, for example, nutrients, energy, and cost, to all the other possible options in a given specified criteria to formulate food-based recommendations for a specific target group. For my next slide, today I'll be talking about complementary feeding. We know that this is the largest component of the first 1,000-day window. It's a transition of a child from 6 months of age from exclusive breastfeeding to consuming solid foods. And it's a period wherein the children are at the highest risk for growth faltering and linear retardation. So in the Philippines, where I am from, we conducted a study, and we, in a recent national nutrition survey, have observed that Filipino children are very much vulnerable to stunting, wasting, and underweight. And also, complementary diets in the Philippines are predominantly plant-based, meaning there's a higher risk of malabsorption of important nutrients, especially zinc and iron. So my research question for the next slide will answer my aims of the study, which was to use the development, the linear programming analyzed complementary feeding recommendations based on the current intake and diet patterns of Filipino breastfeeding children. So in a software that's called OptiFood, that's the linear programming tool that I used, I was able to answer these research questions. And I'll be answering them one by one in the next slides to come. So for the next slide, which is my methodology, these are the steps which I did to gather my data. So phase 1 is a cross-sectional survey conducted during the lean months of 2018, and then we did intervention last year, 2019. We collected dietary, anthropometric, and market survey because we're also modeling the cost. This is optional, but because we wanted to know the lowest cost nutritionally best diet for the target population, we collected market survey based on the commonly consumed foods that were reported from the 24-hour recall. So the steps in selecting the final draft of complementary feeding recommendations involved assessment of critical nutrient gaps, diet adequacy, and also we included diet diversification from the different food groups. Last phase involved an intervention study. We'll probably have that in a different session. So today I'll be talking about the results for phase 1. Okay, so next slide is the OptiFood. This is the diet modeling software I used. It has 4 modules. We can probably click further, Jules, so that oh, okay, that I think it's not showing most of the definition of OptiFood. So OptiFood rigorously selects the best diet from hundreds and thousands of model diets that are run in each analysis to inform decisions. So next slide shows all these 4 modules. Can we show the next slide, please?
Hold on, there's like some glitch in my computer right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just fixing it.
I can, yeah, keep going then, that's fine.
Okay.
So we have 4 modules in OptiFood. The first one is you wanted to check whether your diets are realistic enough. So you check all your entries and diets. Also, we want to be as accurate as possible when we enter our food composition values. So that's very sensitive. Okay, and the next is testing this recommendation. So we evaluate everything. We draft different selection of diets, and then we finally decide on which best selection of different combinations of diet is realistic and feasible to be implemented for your target population. So are we ready to show the next slide? I'm having it.
Hang on a minute. I just need to, maybe I need to stop this and share the screen again. Hold on. Karen, can you hear me?
Can I go on?
Yeah, can you share the slide from your end?
Okay. All right. This may take a while. I'll try to share my own screen.
Yes, please.
I think this is the one.
There we go. You're sharing it from your screen now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So
right.
Let me check if it's moving well.
Yes, it's moving.
Okay. All right. So it's navigating good. So my first research question was, can a complementary diet from local foods alone ensure nutrient adequacy at lowest cost possible? In Module 3, Phase 1 analysis, there is what we call the best case scenario nutrient levels by age group. And this is basically maximizing all the nutrients without regard to all the other nutrients. So it will see if the highest level that can be achieved for that nutrient alone can be achieved using local available foods alone. So it's up to you if you want to model your diet without or with fortified foods. If you want to promote these fortified foods, you can include that in your models. But in my results, it shows that iron, calcium for all age groups are the key problem nutrients because they couldn't meet 100% of the RNI levels. Zinc, thiamine, folate, niacin, yes, to some extent, depending on which age group, but definitely zinc is a problem nutrient for 6 to 11 months. So before children turn 1 year old means that zinc is a very important problem nutrient, but it is very hard to meet using local available foods alone. So this graph itself shows that a food-based strategy may be needed in order to improve the intake of these nutrients, but it can be optimized just looking at how much it can achieve when it's maximized using the different base case scenario diets generated by OptiFood. In the next slide is just an example of OptiFood module 2 to 3. It basically drafts and evaluates different recommendations for different age groups. You can use it in other population groups, by the way. So this is just an example. And now in this red box, I'm just showing you how far it's hard to reach the nutrient levels for iron and zinc. We define adequacy by 65%. That's how we define that adequacy, wherein it is hard to reach when it is below 65%. So complementary diets made of local foods can be optimized, but additional interventions will be needed to meet iron and zinc requirements for 6 to 8 months old. And here are the other results. So I'm just presenting you another case. This is module 3 with and without recommendations, and with OptiFood complementary feeding recommendations. So this analysis showed that the worst and best case scenario nutrient levels expressed as percentage of the desired nutrient levels. And given the local food consumption patterns, it shows that adequacy for most nutrients could be achieved by promoting increasing servings of nutrient-dense foods. This is the blue graphs that can be seen on your right.
Hello, Karen. The slide is not moving. Did you choose the screen correctly?
Is it not moving at all?
Yeah, it just shows on slide. Now it's moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Already, Karen.
So how?
Don't forget to click the yeah.
Is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it going now? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just checking if you've seen this slide.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on. This one is answering what is the lowest cost nutritionally best diet covering most nutritional requirements of the Filipino children. This is my final drafts for this is my final draft for 6 to 12 months, rather 6 to 23 months old children. So in addition to breast milk and other foods, children should consume these different food groups and different minimum serves of these different food groups. So you can see that I've incorporated 45 foods, including cereals and cereal-based beverages for 6 to 11 months, and daily servings of vegetables, alternate servings of legumes and beans. And you can see that we are able to minimize the cost. This is on top of the base diets. So we can see that a little bit pricey for 6 to 8 months because we've included 45 cereals. So for my third research question, how often should a home fortification be done to ensure that the risk of inadequacy of nutrients are low? So home fortification for this example means point of use fortification. So you are able to bring that home and use at home to feed the children. An example would be micronutrient powders or LNP, small quantity. So the best combinations of diet is generated by OptiFood, meaning we will try to combine optimized diet from local food and home fortification to produce an optimized diet that will best meet the nutrient requirements of the population. For these results, we're able to identify the minimum servings of different interventions food for which diet adequacy is guaranteed for most nutrients. So here we can see how a home fortification alone and combining it with CFR can lower the requirement for these intervention foods. MNP is micronutrient powder, FBF and MNP combined. FBS is a fortified blended flour, and in this case, it's the Remo product produced by Department of Science and Technology, FNRI, together with MNP, and then LNS small quantity for daily ration. So home fortification alone may require increased servings of these food intervention foods, and combining that with CFR may lower that requirement in terms of minimum servings or packs if they are served weekly. And the results also show that MNP or LNSSQ is the most cost effective, and it will ensure adequacy for most nutrients except calcium, because calcium is a macro mineral and it is not present in MNP. So you may require other food-based intervention if you want to fill in that gap for calcium. So to conclude this research, complementary feeding diets made of local foods can be optimized. Additional interventions will be needed. Iron can be closed. The gaps for iron can be closed using different intervention foods, such as home fortification. But for calcium, you will have to find another way because it may not be sufficient. So made on local foods, even after including fortified manufactured foods in the diet model, this will still not achieve nutrient adequacy for iron. So you will need home fortification. Also, our conclusion is when combining CFRs with home fortification, it can ensure adequacy for most nutrients and is the most cost effective. As you can see, we have the lowest cost when a complementary feeding recommendation is combined with an MNP. So that's just an example. Effectiveness of developed complementary feeding recommendations need to be evaluated in terms of improving nutrient density and nutritional status of the Filipino children. So we have already analyzed this one, and we've seen positive results. We have seen increased or improved percentage of children meeting minimum diet diversity, and also they have also improved nutritional status, in particular for the percentage of wasting. So, but we will have to probably discuss about it in the next session if there is another opportunity. So that it would be for my presentation, and if you have more questions, the floor is open now. Thank you for listening.
Right, thanks very much, Karen. That's a very fantastic presentation. And looking at the chat box, I haven't seen any questions, but if you guys have questions, we have 2 to 3 minutes to, you can raise your questions by probably just picking up or just putting it on the chat box. So we have 2 to 3 minutes for question and answer, and Karen would be very happy to answer your questions. Any questions from the listeners or the audience, please? Right. So whilst waiting for others to, maybe they're still thinking about what questions to ask, I have maybe I was just thinking, are you also thinking of doing this kind of methodology to other mix of nutrition interventions, like for example, salt iodization, or for example, food fortifications? Because just we're having this is quite a very new way or approach of looking at how effective or how can we solve some malnutrition problems, and just thinking, can we apply this to other interventions?
Yes, most definitely. For if you are depending of what you want to cover, Jules, commercial fortified foods or like food fortification. So special fortified products, just like what I mentioned. So you can use linear programming analysis to generate simulations of combinations of fortified products and to determine their weekly frequency of feeding required, such that the combination of these fortified products or whatever fortificant you want to use and their local diet can ensure the adequacy of most nutrients. So this is definitely promising to use in that area.
So, yeah, thanks, Karen, for answering my question. There's a couple of questions from the chat box, and now I'm going to read them one by one.
Yeah, I can read that.
Yeah, first question is from Irene Arnejo. So his question is, in calculating the adequacy of the food, was continuous breastfeeding until 23 months assumed?
So in calculating the adequacy of food was continuous. Yes, so for the target population, we will have to determine whether your population is non-breastfed or a breastfed population. So they have different energy requirements, and you will need to produce or generate separate sets of recommendations for breastfeeding and non-breastfeeding children.
Right, and I hope that answers Irene's question. So another question from Hafiza Zah. How can I combine hospital's diet treatment with additional food or commercial food?
Hospital diet should definitely be incorporated in your food list. So you need to be able to have an idea of the kind of diet you are providing and their food composition taken into consideration when you when you check your diets. That's in phase 1 of the OptiFood.
Right, so diet should be included in the food list or the local food list.
Hospital diet. So I'm not really sure what you meant by hospital diet treatment, if you can be more accurate with that, but that has definitely be taken into consideration when you enter the diets in your OptiFood with additional food from commercial food. Yeah.
All right, thanks very much, Karen. Another question from Alice. Are the local foods the same in different regions of the Philippines?
Yeah, so this is from rural coastal area of the southern Luzon in the Philippines. I think you're from here, Jules, right? So the geography has a lot of impact on the diet patterns and also the kind of diets that they consume every day. So different recommendations, they are sensitive to that, and different recommendations may be required when it comes to different geographies. So this one is produced at the municipal level, and different complementary recommendation, even seasonality, can affect your recommendations. So this is highly sensitive, and so you will need to produce another recommendations if there are varying diet patterns in the different regions.
Right, thanks, Karen. And I hope that answers Alice's question. And
I hope that addressed your question,
yeah.
Alice.
So another question from Mohammed Nur Hassan Shah. What is good interventions to meet the needs of iron and calcium? In Indonesia, we have local foods rich of iron, but in reality, iron cannot be absorbed properly. How about in the food?
You know, in Southeast Asia, it's a common case. And in case you haven't read Dr. Elaine Ferguson's recent paper on OptiFood in Southeast Asia, it's been observed in most of Southeast Asia that complementary diets in Southeast Asia are lacking iron and zinc. But from the analysis in the Philippines, it shows, oh, so your question was about calcium and iron, sorry. So iron and calcium, okay, so calcium can be met by formula milk. So that's an interesting fact in the Philippines. It's just that we do not recommend them. So we've taken them out of the models because of the milk code. But if in the policy, there is a recommendation to produce a milk that may not able to substitute breastfeeding, then you can use other dairy products or milk, which is also a good source, definitely a good source of calcium. But for iron, we will have to intervene using micronutrient powders. Calcium, I believe in Indonesia, can be met by fortified biscuit.
Right, thanks, Karen. Another question from Carmela. Local governments are asking about the types of food to include in the relief packs during this pandemic. Do you think software such as OptiFood would be useful?
Yes, Carmela. So different relief packs during the pandemic. So it can also be used in emergency responses. So you will have to determine the current diet of your target population and then incorporate these packs. So yes, that is also possible.
Right, and maybe we could use this to improve the relief packs being given right now in the Philippines, hopefully.
Yeah, like LNS, large quantity, lipid-based nutrient supplements in large quantities, and other RUTFs, if that's what you meant, Carmela, RUTF. So we already have a lot of publications with regard to that, and they use linear programming to determine the amount of therapeutic foods that they can use to determine the adequacy for these populations.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen. Another question from Hafiza. Hafiza is a pediatric nutritionist, and they have a standard food for child diets in their country, made by local food and of course less micronutrients, especially iron. In other side of their hospital, not using commercial food. So should they combine it by commercial food? And could you give an example of fortification food for a child?
Commercial food. Yes, so with linear programming, it's basically a combination of food to combine to produce a diet that will best meet their recommendations. So you can combine commercial food and you can combine it with a fortified product, like special fortified product. What is concerning there is the toxicity. So you might want to check the upper intake levels of that you want to look at. And for example, zinc and also vitamin A, vitamin B12, these are the kind of nutrients that you would like to check in terms of toxicity because they tend to be adequate already in local foods. And so giving them, obtaining them from a fortified commercial food and another fortified food would probably, there's gonna be excess of that.
Okay, I hope that clarifies Hafiza's question. Another question from Alfie Fairuz Asna is there any local food that can be a food-based recommendation?
So local food is defined as whatever that is available in the locality. You can include manufactured complementary food or based on whole natural foods, right? So in both cases, they can be used in your food-based approach. Normally it's hard to meet them without fortified foods from your local food. So, but the answer is yes to both. It's just that it may be difficult to meet in these cases. So the question is there any local food in particular that can be a food-based recommendation? So based from the different studies, it's been shown that like particular food like anchovy, chicken, or in some other areas there's worm, which is high in protein and other minerals that were found to be key foods and are promoted to increase the intakes of iron and zinc. In our case, it's the legumes with the mung bean. There is anchovy also consumed in the area. It's just that the serving size is too small, that it cannot meet even if it's promoted, it still wouldn't meet the iron requirements. So we took it out of the recommendation and instead recommended a general recommendation of consuming fish maybe 5 times a week or 3 times a week, I think. So yeah, it depends on your area, but in Indonesia, anchovy and fortified biscuit were the topmost key food found in these areas to be promoted.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Last question from Zakia. Is MNP a commercial product in the Philippines, and is it largely consumed?
No, so micronutrient powders are distributed by different institutions, organizations. So at the moment, they are being distributed by DOH, but in the municipality where I did my research, it was a collaboration of Helen Keller. So also depends on the priority provinces that's been selected to receive these kinds of fortified products. At the moment, they're also distributing liquid-based nutrients. So that's why I thought in incorporating program. So it's not a commercial product. I don't think, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not easily accessible unless it's distributed. So you cannot see that. And I'm not sure, Jules, can you help me with this? I think the LNS can be bought from DOST. But
yeah, so what I know is that MNP has been introduced first than the LNS. I think LNS.
Yeah, but it's not, they are not commercialized, so they are just distributed by the government and NGOs to prioritize provinces.
So MNP right now is having attraction at the commercial market. So there are a lot of private sector, like for example, MSEs, which are producing MNPs already, but they're still having some problems with marketing and promoting it because these companies are quite small, the medium scale companies. So they're having problems with how to market this kind of foods. They're trying to incorporate it in the social relief package or social interventions in the Philippines, but like a commercial scale on marketing is quite a difficulty, I think. Yeah, but it's starting to get like it's starting to get being noticed. Yeah, especially the importance of MNPs. But like, yeah, relatively with LNS, like LNS has been introduced in the government, but we're still not finding ways of how to really usage?
Because these are usually mass distributed. But except for FPF, which is the fortified blended flour, Remo is one example. So I just gave that as example in the results. I know you can buy that from local distributors directly, but they are not largely consumed as well.
Yeah. All right. So I think thanks, Karen. So if you can see a reaction option in your chat back in your Zoom software, you can give Karen a clap or a thumbs up.
Oh.
And yeah, so thanks, Karen, for that very fantastic presentation.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah,
it's so nice to see you guys again. It's been a while.
Yeah, so Karen, if you can just unshare your screen so I can share my screen. I think I can share my screen now.
Okay.
For the next presentation. Thank you very much. Yes, thanks very much, Karen. So just to share my screen, I hope I can share my screen now. So can you see my screen now, guys?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes, I
Thank
can.
you very much. So again, thank you, Karen, for that presentation. So now we carry on to the next presentation to be given by Preeti. So Preeti is pursuing her PhD in the Department of Food and Nutrition, Institute of Home Economics at the University of Delhi in India. She is passionate about learning new things every day and looks forward to take up the research challenges. She was recently awarded by the Doha Society to present her PhD work at the Doha Congress held at Melbourne, Australia. She was also chosen as one of the youth delegates to meet and interact with President Barack Obama at a town hall in Delhi. She strongly feels that food has a major role to play than just filling out our stomachs, and that's why she took up this challenge field of nutritional neuroscience as a research specialization. So for this Hangout session, Preeti will be giving light about the relationship and interaction between nutrition and mental health across the lifespan. So Preeti, if you're there, can you
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, so just tell me when to shift the slides. Yeah.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is doing good. Stay healthy, stay safe. Coming on to the nutritional neuroscience medicine studying public of Delhi. Next slide, please. WHO data indicates that 3.3 and 4.5% of the Indian population is suffering from anxiety and depression symptoms. WHO has ranked depression as the single largest contributor to the global disability. And as all of us know now, depression and mental health again are a great concern worldwide. Next. Autumn has introduced a life cycle-based model to map the relevant risk factors in a chronological order from the preconceptional period of one generation to the next generation. Which this etiological model also involves the environmental influences, and further to understand these environmental influences, we had conceptualized the environmental correlates of food among adolescents. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the environment was further divided into cultural, physical, social, and personal environment, and some of the cofactors involved all of these environment were added as covariants in the present research. Next. Research has also proven a fact that a poor quality diet, which is lacking in micronutrients, omega-3 fatty acids and proteins, and simultaneously which has a high glycemic load, is high in saturated fats and simple sugars, is itself a major risk factor for these adolescents to develop the onset of poor mental health outcomes. Next. Based on these findings, we decided the rationale of the study as adolescence is a transitional life phase that is associated with heightened risk of three major health conditions: malnourishment, eating disorders, and mental health problems. Most of these problems begin during youth but are detected for the first time in later life. Dietary habits and eating behavior are again one of the modifiable factors for the prevention of these major public health concerns. Given the established comorbidities of these problems, one research area which further needs exploration is the association between the risk factors and the expression and maintenance of these problems. Next slide, please. Basically, to understand the importance of nutrition, first we need to deep dive into the role of these nutrients in the proper brain functioning of a human being. And as we can see, the macro and micronutrients, next slide please, are involved in maintaining a proper balance in the brain as well as enhancing positive mental health outcomes involving brain signaling and neurotransmission as well. Next slide, please. Research has also proven, and recent systematic reviews have again and again focused on certain food groups like the whole grains, vegetables, GLBs, fresh fruits, nuts, oysters, sunflower seeds, as these food groups, if not taken in the right amounts in the diet, can lead to deficiencies of vitamins and minerals, and these vitamins and minerals can further impact the brain health and can lead to deficiency symptoms like poor concentrations, anxiety, depression, confusion, and even in some cases lack of motivation and loss of appetite. Next slide, please. Based on these research evidence, next slide, we designed the research questions for our present research. Next slide, please. The primary objective was to find the association. No, the previous slide. Slide number 35. Yeah. Hold on, yeah. Can we go back to the last slide, please? Yeah, thanks. So the primary objective was to explore the association of mental health and diet quality among these adolescents, with certain secondary objectives like to study the prevalence of mental health disorders and to ascertain the quality of diet consumed by them. Next slide, please. The study was conducted in two phases. During phase 1, subjects were enrolled, 546 adolescents aged 13 to 15 years, whose parents had given a written consent and who were apparently healthy and not consuming any kind of medications were included in the study. And during phase 2, data was collected through interview-cum-questionnaire schedules, which was followed by anthropometric and mental health assessment. Next slide, please. For the mental health assessment, child behavior checklist, CBCL, was used and it was administered to the parents of the subjects. CBCL addresses depression and anxiety as mental health indicators. Apart from this, dietary data too was collected using the 24-hour recall method for one working day and a holiday and food frequency questionnaire. The dietary data further was subjected to a micronutrient quality check based on the AMQI index, which is based on Indian dietary guidelines and is specifically designed for adolescents. Next slide, please. So out of 546 adolescents, 325 were males and 221 were females studying in 7th, 8th and 9th grade of the classes. As far as their nutritional status is concerned, I really want to bring up the issue of double burden of malnutrition over here, as it is evident from the research findings that 21.9% of the subjects were underweight, whereas 14.8% were overweight, and simultaneously there was a population group of 13.9% which were obese as well, underlining that malnutrition was very much prevalent among these population groups. Next slide, please. Moving on to the prevalence of mental health symptoms, 33.5% and 27.4% of the subjects had depression and anxiety, and more males in comparison to females were affected by this syndrome. Next slide, please. The current slide shows the frequency of consumption of snacks, processed foods, sweets, and I really want to draw your attention towards this data set. Why? Because as per the FSSAI, which is the Food Regulatory Authority of India, and Indian Pediatric Society, these foods have been classified as HFSS foods, that is high in fat, sugar and salt containing foods. And again it has been emphasized that HFSS foods lead to poor mental health outcomes. And if you just concentrate on the third column, which is the consumption pattern of 2 to 3 times in a week, it can be seen that many of these products were consumed at least twice or thrice in a week. And I also want to highlight that there were multiple food items which were being consumed at a single point, and it was not just a single product. So again, the diets of these adolescents was again high in sugar, saturated fats, and it was again lacking the protein and micronutrients. Next slide, please. So as far as adolescent micronutrient quality index is concerned, I just want to give you a brief about the AMQI index and the scoring pattern. So what happens is, as we collect the data from the food frequency questionnaires and 24-hour recalls, we again subdivide them into different food group categories as per the scale of AMQI, and based on the consumption patterns, which is again based on the amounts prescribed as per the RDA for that particular food group, the scoring is given, which ranges from 0 to 10. And I want to draw your attention towards certain food groups like fried foods and consumption of tea and coffee and fats and oils. Again, the consumption, the scoring pattern of these groups is in a reverse order. For example, if you are consuming, fried foods in large quantity, so you will be given a score of 0. Whereas if you are not consuming pulses at all, you will be given a score of 0. So if we just look at the food group section of green leafy vegetables, other vegetables, and sprouted fermented foods and salads, we can see the subjects got a score of 0, which means that as per the food recall and record data that we had gathered, they were not consuming any vegetables and pulses or sprouted pulses or fermented products in their diets in the last 2 days, in the previous days. And the consumption of tea and coffee with meals was very high. Consumption of fried foods was very high, which was again interfering with the absorption of many of these nutrients. Next slide, please. The subjects were specifically questioned about their consumption of milk on usual school days as a part of their breakfast meals. And I really want to draw your attention towards this data set, because out of 546 subjects, 263 subjects refused that they were not consuming any milk on usual working days and even on holidays. And subjects who were consuming milk were only consuming not more than 50 ml of milk in the entire day. And as we can see, the subjects who have reported that they were consuming milk had significantly lower scores for their mental health outcomes like depression and anxiety for both males and females in comparison to the subjects, those who were not consuming milk at all. Again, signifying the importance of having proteins in the diet for the production of essential amino acids, which leads to the secretion of essential neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine to balance the mental health of an individual. Next slide, please. This is a very interesting slide, and I really want to take you through this. What happened was that there was a severity of symptoms which we had observed in these subjects. And as we can see, as we moved on from normal to borderline cases, then to clinical cases, the energy consumption and specifically fat consumption was significantly increasing, whereas the protein and micronutrients again were significantly decreasing, again and again emphasizing that these micronutrients and proteins were lacking from the diet of these young adolescents as they were majorly surviving on junk food. Next slide, please. Similar pattern of association was also observed for anxiety symptoms, that when a person who doesn't have anxiety starts to show borderline anxiety symptoms and then becomes a clinical case, again, the energy consumption and the fat consumption were significantly increasing, and the micronutrients and the proteins were significantly decreasing. Next slide, please. Moving on, the current slide shows the type of the food which was consumed by these subjects, and these photographs were collected during the time of data collection. Again, I want to specify that all these foods were HFSS foods, high in sugar, fat and salt. They were lacking micronutrients and proteins, and they were just providing empty calories to these growing adolescents who were unaware about this fact, and it was ultimately not only hampering their physical health as well as their mental health as well. Next slide, please. So coming on to why nutrition is an important part which needs to be considered when dealing with subjects who show, mental health symptoms. First of all, I will give you a simple example. Something like, if we don't have proteins in our diet, every one of you must be knowing that if we lack proteins in the diet, our body is not able to secrete the essential amino acid serotonin, which is a happy hormone, and serotonin is supposed to keep you happy and calm. And similarly, like tyrosine is the precursor for dopamine. Dopamine regulates your impulses, your impulsive reactions, and keeps you calm. So if a person is lacking good quality and quantity of protein, that needs to be emphasized again, quality as well as quantity of protein in the diet, then again, these symptoms will be prevalent in such population. Next slide, please. Another important factor and pathway which has a bi-directional relationship with physical and mental health is the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines in a situation of stress. For example, when you're depressed, when you're angry, or when you are feeling anxious. So what happens is your body produces pro-inflammatory cytokines, and these cytokines lead to oxidative stress in the body. And if a person is consuming high GI diets, which is lacking dietary fiber in the diet, as well as consuming refined cereals and high sugar foods, what happens is that the inflammation process in the body increases and predisposes individuals to other metabolic conditions like obesity and metabolic syndrome, which are again quite prevalent among this age group, which further enhances the process of leading to poor mental health outcomes. So my request to each one of you is, since you are in a lockdown, there will be situations when you might feel that you are just feeling depressed. So please prep up a sprout salad for yourself and just consume it instead of having that sugar coated bar or the sugar sweetened commercial beverage. So I hope the session was informative to you. Next slide, please. Thank you. And these are the publications related to the current topic. You can just view them and let us know in case you have any queries. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Preeti, for that very, very interesting presentation. And if you have questions, guys, you can send your question in again to our group chat box, and I will be happy to read them one by one. And so whilst you are probably formulating your questions, Preeti, I have one question for you, which I usually get from people who I meet, and then they know that I am a nutritionist, and they usually ask me like, what is the best diet composition, or the best meal that I could have if I have like a mental health problem or if I am depressed or anxious. So what's do you have I know this is quite like a question that we nutritionists and dietitians always get, and I would just like to get your perspective. What diet composition should everyone who are having mental health problems should consume?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and that's an interesting discussion point. Again, I really want to emphasize on this thing that due to urbanization, industrialization, and as we move out of our countries and our native places, our traditional dietary pattern changes. So what happens is that as and when our traditional dietary pattern changes, something like if traditionally in India, if I talk about India, what happens is that we were having multigrains and whole grains, pulses and millets as a part of our diet. But eventually we could see that we were, now we are consuming more of refined cereals, and that's leading to additional problems of diabetes, obesity, and poor mental health outcomes even in adults. So what is happening is that we are shifting away from our traditional dietary patterns and a diet as per the RDA, which has a diversification in it, which includes at least 4 to 5 food groups. If I am talking about food groups, I am referring to cereals, pulses, and millets. And then even if we are consuming the animal products, please go in for your chicken and your fishes, as they are the lean meats, and the fishes will give you the EPA and DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid, which are now being used as fortificants in India for beverages, especially designed for kids, because it helps in proper neurodevelopment of the kids. So fishes will help you give that. And if not, you can go for consuming flax seeds. Flax seeds are the richest vegetarian source of omega-3 fatty acids. And apart from this, I will again emphasize that please stick to your traditional oils, traditional and healthy oils, and please use a blend of oils to obtain the right amount of fatty acids in the right quantity and proportion for the metabolism in the body.
Thanks very much, Preeti, and for answering my question. There are a couple of questions right here in the chat box, and I would like to throw in a question sent by Allison. So if you could give more emphasis on the relationship between nutritional status of individuals and their mental health. Yeah.
Okay. What happens is that nutritional neuroscience is itself a very, very recent area of research. And as far as studies are concerned, yes, there are a group of researchers in New Zealand, Australia, as well as in Canada, who are working on optimizing diets with a group of psychologists, psychiatrists, and nutritionists on board. And then they are prescribing Mediterranean diets. Again, if I focus on the composition of Mediterranean diets, it is again a very traditional based diet, which is rich in omega-3s, which is high in dietary fibers, consists of grains in terms of multigrains, and uses olive oil, which is a very traditional source of oil in the Mediterranean diet, as one of the cooking sources. So again, emphasis is again on moving towards your own traditional dietary patterns. And there are randomized controlled trials which have happened among adolescents as well as among adults, which emphasize that yes, these products are helping in improving the poor mental health outcomes. And again, I recently have a conversation with one of my friends who is a working psychiatrist, and they were telling me that when they are prescribing antidepressants to the patients who are reporting very high depressive symptoms and who are very anxious. So what happens is that those patients also have the symptoms of diet elimination, which is like they will feel anorexic, they will not eat or consume any food because there is lack of motivation in them to consume food. And there are some subjects who will consume excess amount of food, and that will further lead to obesity. Again, there is a bi-directional relationship with physical health and mental health. So they have been approaching me to design diets for them which are which can manage their nutritional status along with the antidepressants. So yes, these things are there in terms of research, and nutritional psychiatry, yes, is still in its infancy stages, I will say, but yes, we are going on with the trend.
Right, thanks very much, Preeti. There's one more question from Hikma. So what do you think about DAS-42 questionnaire for assessing the level of stress, anxiety, and depression? And can this questionnaire be used for a patient with normal nutritional status and obesity?
I have not used DAS. I have specifically mentioned that I've used CBCL. CBCL is Child Behavior Checklist, and it is, it was developed by Ackenbach, and it is a patented and what I should say that it is legally approved to use with kids. So DAS 42, what I feel is a little old measure, because it was developed somewhere in the 90s or the 80s. So I will suggest that you should come up you should use a new tool for assessment, because there are many other psychiatric tools available on American Psychiatric Association's website, as well as WHO has designed themselves a SDQ questionnaire, which can be used as a basic simple screening questionnaire, and which is a 7-point or a 8-point questionnaire, and it can be used simply with any group of population. And apart from this, you can even use PHQ-9. That is also beneficial, and it is a small questionnaire, again limiting to 7 to 8 questions, and can be used for all age groups and for all population groups.
Thanks, Preeti. Another
Yeah.
question from Mohammed Nur Hassan Shah. How did you determine the AMQI, and what criteria or indicators show the best or the better?
Yeah, so AMQI is Adolescent Micronutrient Quality Index. So what happens is that before doing the micronutrient quality check, you need to have the data in terms of your 24-hour recall and food frequency questionnaire, which will distribute the consumption of the subjects into food groups of cereals, pulses, sprouted pulses, fats and oils, milk and milk products, fermented foods, etc., etc. And AMQI again is a checklist which is designed and based on the consumption pattern in accordance with the RDA for that particular age group. They give the scoring, and the scoring ranges from 0 to 5 to 10. And there is a reverse scoring pattern, as I have already mentioned during my presentation, for the food groups like sugars, fats and oils, and consumption of tea and coffee with milk. So if you are consuming high levels of sugars, fried foods, and if you are consuming beverages like tea and coffee with milk, then you will be given a 0, even if your consumption is limited to 2 per day. What I mean is, if you're consuming twice the drinks, so it will be 0 for you. And if you are not at all consuming the pulses or the cereals, then you will be given a 0. And as and when your level of intake increases as per the RDA prescribed for that age group, what will happen is your scoring will increase. And it also has a component of food variety and dietary diversification, and then it gives a total score based on the food groups that everyone has consumed. So it's basically based on the data which you collect from the participants. Indicator or criteria which is best, I think AMQI was best in our case, because we were targeting adolescents, and the scale is very much verified with the Indian adolescents as well, and it is developed in India itself. So we had a brief meeting with the researchers as well, and we understood how to implement the AMQI checklist with the data sets. So I think AMQI is best to work with adolescents. Yeah.
Thanks, Preeti. And for that question, I have the answer. Ansha's question. We have another question from Chun Ming. How can the psychology aspects of a child help in behavior change? For instance, change in their diet.
Again, a very interesting question. And psychological aspects, yes, again, go a long way in in behavior change communication. I will specifically target behavior change over here. Why? Because we're talking about changes in the dietary patterns of even for example, kids. So what happens is that if you give them a motivation on a daily basis to change their behaviors, to change the way they're thinking, to change the way they're consuming their meals, something like just having a small family meal and not using any screens during that family meal, and just discussing about how was the day, probably will have a more positive impact in comparison to someone who is just binge eating and watching Netflix 24/7. And probably, I think during this lockdown period, every one of us has experienced all of this. So again, psychology and nutrition go hand in hand, and psychological aspects are very important for behavior change communication in all public health measures. And yes, targeting population at a psychological level, and social marketing again needs to be done in the positive aspects and not in the negative aspects of the population group we are catering to. So yes, they go hand in hand. Yeah.
Thanks, Preeti. And that's a very interesting question indeed. Another question from Alj Rashid. I hope I was able to pronounce your name correctly. Well, thanks, Preeti, for the presentation. She said, and you mentioned just now the importance of amino acid for mental health. Does any of your respondents practice vegan or vegetarian diet?
Okay, thank you for that question. I really want to highlight another important thing that in India, most of us, traditionally are vegetarians. So yes, probably, you can say out of 546 subjects, 200 plus were vegetarians, and not specifically vegan in terms of, not consuming milk or not consuming honey, because that was not the focus of this study. But yes, vegetarian, if I am concerned about, yes, more than 50% were vegetarian.
Thanks, Preeti. Another question from Aji regarding the relationship of food and nutrition with mental health. Do you think a plant-based diet is better to prevent mental health issues?
Thank you, Aji, for that amazing question. I personally feel that, there is a dietary pattern shift now when we are talking about sustainability and SDG goals as well. So definitely, yes, to go about plant-based diets are a thumbs up. But, there are certain sections of the community who are traditionally, having fish as a part of their diet, or who are, traditionally consuming chicken as a part of their diet. For example, if I talk about India, down south, in the coastal areas, fish is consumed as a normal part of the diet. So, advising someone to again move out of the traditional way is not recommended. But yes, definitely plant-based diets are the way to go. But for people who are traditionally consuming fishes and chicken, they should I think still be consuming them. And for people who are consuming red meat, they should shift towards the white meat and the lean meats, which includes chicken and fishes, yeah, and the seafood.
Right. Thanks very much, Preeti, again for answering the question. Another question from Vita. You emphasize on traditional diet. Does it correlate with nutrigenomics?
Traditional diet and nutrigenomics. Nutrigenomics is itself, a different field area. And now, if we just correlate it with the mental health and traditional diet, yes, there are relationships which have been developed that, that you're, again, coming back to the traditional diet concepts, that traditional diets do have an impact on genes which promote, healthy lifestyle, or which suppress obesity. But again, these are very specific to the communities in which the studies were done. So traditional diet, yes, should be consumed with the recommendations of the RDA for that particular community.
Right. Thanks very much again, Preeti. Another question from Yulianto. Considering COVID-19 outbreak now, do you think higher protein, pulses, milk, etc. may offer a protective effect on immune system, pro-inflammatory cytokines?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Vita. What I will like to emphasize is that, as per the recommended dietary allowances or the recommended dietary intakes given to us by individually by our own, regulatory bodies in our different countries, which vary from individual to individual, even, we people are not even consuming 50 to 60% of those recommended amounts. Even if we consume those, these food groups in those recommended amounts, definitely we will get the beneficial impact of those food groups. And these recommended RDAs and RDIs are given to the population, keeping in amount the safe limits and the safe allowances for conditions where you can fall ill and when your body needs to fight an infection. So something which is recommended by your local your regulatory body for this for a particular consumption of this food group, that should be followed. Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much, Preeti. Last question from Akanksha Srivastava. I hope I was able to pronounce your name correctly. Association, could you please give more emphasis on the association between immune boosting foods and mental health?
Okay, immune boosting foods. Immunity again is boosted by your consumption of vitamin C, vitamin E, omega-3 rich foods. And if I think Akansha is from India, and if we consider our own traditional dietary patterns and try to follow them on a regular basis during this lockdown period, definitely we will be able to boost our immunities. And if we live up to the expectations of eating 2 fruits a day along with good amount of fiber and multigrains, definitely we will be able to boost our immunity. So that's it. Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much, Preeti, and thanks to everyone for your questions. It was a very interesting discussion. And please give a Preeti your reactions. Could be like a clap or a thumbs up. Yeah, thanks very much, Preeti, again. And before we go to the last part of our session for today, I just like to share this slide. So if you would like to get a copy or the recording of our session for today, you can go to our Twitter, our newly Twitter handle for iYouLead at iYouLead2. So it's already up in Twitter. So we will be sharing the slides or the recording there, like a link for the recording there. And if you find the session very interesting, there is another session, a Zoom Hangout session 2 on April 25, same time, global. And right, it was a very interesting discussion, and I really enjoyed my time with you guys today. So I think you were able to see my message. So in my message in WhatsApp, so if you could like just turn on your cameras and show your signs so that we can be able to like give this a screenshot and share it to everyone globally. Yay, thanks very much, everyone.